Okay.
There it is.
Okay, so maybe I wasn't recording it. Sorry about that. Oh my goodness. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. It's
it's
the presentation and the Q&A that are the most important
Okay.
parts.
All right, so we're doing it now. Okay. Welcome. We have one more guest, Jeanette. You want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. Sorry I joined a little late. I had another meeting that ran a little long. So my name's Janet Bernabe. I am the organizing director for the Center for Community Action and Environmental Justice. But I was previously with Mi Familia Vota. And I'm actually also a current resident from the city of Riverside for 25 years. And I see our mayor's on. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, Commissioner. Sorry about
Okay. We've got one more technical issue to overcome.
Okay.
When I hit share screen, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So if you can
no. Okay,
allow
so-
me to share my screen, I will do
Yes,
so.
just let's see, I forget. Kayvon, you want to tell me what to do here?
So you want to go to participants, and then click that little arrow,
Okay,
and then go to J. Ray Kennedy's name, and then make co-host.
okay, it says invite. All right, wait, it had something else. I hit
Well, I'm
participant.
sorry. Press on the participants button itself, and then there should be a list of the participants
Okay,
on the right side.
and go to, yes, right here. And make, wait, it says chat. I'm sorry about that. Okay, what a
There should be like a blue button, and you
button
go
that
over it.
says, it says more.
Yeah, and then you click on it, and then there should be like a make co-host option.
Okay, here it is. All right. Is that okay now?
Yes,
Oh my goodness. Well, as you can tell.
there we go.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you all for inviting the California Citizens Redistricting Commission to make this educational presentation to you this evening. We are going to go over what the commission is, what we do, and how you can get involved in the process. And let's see. Okay. The one thing that I need to make everybody aware of is because this is an educational presentation, I will not be taking any public input today. We will have public input sessions later in the year. There are ways that you can provide public input now, just not at this event. So when we get to Q&A, I can answer questions about the presentation, but we can't talk about actual district lines. And we'll go over the ways to provide public input later in the presentation. So first of all, we're trying to make redistricting interesting. It's not something that is top of people's minds. In simplifying it, we've come down to redistricting is drawing new boundaries that determine which Californians are represented by each electoral district. So after every census, there is a redistricting process. That redistricting process results in electoral districts that are on the books for the next 10 years until the next census takes place. Why do we redraw district maps? Well, over the course of 10 years, communities change in a number of ways. People are born, people die, people move in, people move out. As a result, communities grow and shrink, and areas where there were once roughly the same number of people become unequal. You've probably heard that Riverside County is one of the highest growth areas in the state. So, as the population moves around, When we get the census results, then we need to redraw the district lines. Your voice is important in this process because redistricting has been used in the past or in other places at times to exclude communities from political power. And by fully participating in and monitoring this redistricting process, we're hoping that more communities will have a better opportunity to elect candidates of their choice who will voice their needs and interests in Sacramento and in Washington. Redistricting affects people in a variety of ways. The Voters First Act back in 2008 was historic in California by transferring the responsibility for drawing district lines from the state legislature to the people of the state. Having the opportunity to elect representatives that actually champion the issues that their communities care about is important in a state like California, where issues can vary dramatically from one region to the next or even one street to the next. Northern California might be interested in environmental and economic issues. Central California might champion water and agricultural issues. Here in Southern California, we may be more concerned with transportation, housing, and employment. And we want people to represent us who share our concerns. Funding priorities tied to the issue of electing representatives that champion your issues is that of electing representatives who hold similar views about funding priorities. You might want to elect representatives that have your financial interests at heart. When time comes to build a state budget or a national budget, you want a representative fighting to ensure that your community actually gets the financial resources that it deserves for various services: education, water, fire protection, all of the other things that we get funding for from Sacramento and Washington. Redistricting process is all about drawing lines and determining which communities actually get grouped into political districts. Your input in this process is essential to help us on the commission understand where your communities are and what their issues are. For better or for worse, redistricting in California is one of the few civic activities that any Californian can provide input into regarding their community that ultimately impacts the laws that are made, regulations, tax structure, how funding is distributed, and which services are provided. Well, the road to fair representation is somewhat complex. As I mentioned before, every 10 years, the entire US population is counted. That's a provision in the national constitution. The census data are used to draw new maps to account for population shifts, both across the states and between districts. Because as population of districts changes over time, it can leave some people overrepresented and others underrepresented. Redistricting serves to even out the population between districts. So after the federal government publishes the updated census information, we'll talk more about that later, California has to redraw the boundaries of its US House of Representatives, State Senate, State Assembly, and State Board of Equalization districts so that the districts correctly reflect the latest count of the state's population. Redistricting is based on the idea that each of our voices should be represented fairly through the creation of districts that have the same number of people. census results are used to draw new maps every 10 years to account for the ways that populations have changed and moved across the states and the districts. So the first real step in the redistricting process is called reapportionment. We are currently awaiting the reapportionment numbers from the Census Bureau. And what that is basically is what will tell us how many seats in the US House of Representatives each state receives. It's based on population. Some states grow faster than others. Some states actually lose population from one census to another. So the first step, once we have the census data, is there will be a process of reapportionment. So that reallocates the House seats among the states so that seats are held by the states in proportion to the size of their population. After that, we'll have several months while we're still waiting for the redistricting data from the census. And the redistricting data will enable us to draw the new district boundaries within the state, both for US House of Representatives, as well as the state Senate, state Assembly, and state Board of Equalization. Now, historically, legislators have often drawn maps that allowed them to actually choose their constituents rather than enabling constituents to be the ones really choosing who's going to represent them. This old system undermined the concept of fair representation, which is to give the people the power to choose their representatives. Now, why does independent redistricting matter? Well, independent redistricting matters largely because of what I just said. If redistricting is left in the hands of legislators, many times over many years in many states, legislators have shown that they are interested in staying in their jobs, and they sometimes draw the lines to ensure that they get to stay in their jobs. But democracy depends on voters having a real opportunity to choose their representatives. This slide highlights some of the key concepts or terms in redistricting. Gerrymandering happens when the election district boundaries are drawn in a way that gives a particular set of people, either a political party, a racial group, or some other group of people, an unfair political advantage over others in the district. And this shows us how a group of 50 people, or you can think of it as 50,000 people, or 500,000 people, or 5 million people, can be grouped into 5 districts. So in this fictitious population, 60% of the population is orange, and orange can be a political party or it can be anything really. 40% purple. 5 districts can be drawn in multiple ways. The first 2 examples show districts that have been drawn that end up with reflecting roughly that same division of the population. So 60% orange, 40% purple. In these first 2 examples, you end up with 60% of the districts being orange and 40% of the districts being purple. Under the gerrymandering column, you have very different results, starting with the same underlying population. In the one on the left, you end up with all of the seats being won by the orange. And in the one on the right, you have the purple winning more seats than they might theoretically be entitled to. And this is why independent commissions like the California Citizens Redistricting Commission were created, removing politics from the process, focusing instead on the people. This is really kind of the crux of the matter. The California State Constitution in Article 21, and this is a result of the Voters First Act that was passed back in 2008, establishes these line drawing criteria that we have to abide by when we're drawing maps. Not only do we have to abide by them, we have to follow these criteria in order when we are drawing district maps. So criterion number 6 is kind of the last thing that we have to worry about. The first thing that we have to worry about is getting the population as equal as possible from one district to another. The second is that we follow the Voting Rights Act to give minorities, and minorities can be defined in various ways, but we give minorities a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their preference. Contiguity is probably the easiest of these. Contiguity means that all parts of the district have to be connected. You can't have the bulk of a constituency, a district, and then a little piece of it is isolated somewhere else. Now, that gets tricky because we have cities in California even that have non-contiguous parts of the city. So the bulk of the city will be, one glob, and then there'll be another part of the city that is not connected physically in any way with the rest of the city. So there aren't that many of them, but there are some, and those will be a challenge to deal with. Why will they be a challenge to deal with? Well, criterion number 4 is communities of interest. The state constitution says that we should do our best, as long as we're respecting criterion 1, criterion 2, and criterion 3, we should also do our best to minimize the division of counties, of cities, of neighborhoods, and of communities of interest as we are drawing these maps. Now, we can easily find out what the boundaries of the 58 counties are. We can easily find out what the boundaries of all of California's incorporated cities are. But when it gets down to neighborhoods and communities of interest, that is where we need input from the people of California. The 14 of us, we're diverse, but we don't know the entire state like the back of our hand. So we need the public to provide input to help us understand where neighborhoods begin and end, where communities of interest begin and end. The next criterion is geographically compact. So this basically says if you are building a district and you have a choice between bringing in nearby population and bringing in a more distant population, we should prefer the population that is closer by. But again, we have to respect criterion 1, criterion 2, criterion 3, and criterion 4 before we worry ourselves with how compact the district is. And also, as we talked about, the geography of some of California's cities. I mean, I've got a map of Riverside County right here beside me, and some of these cities, they just have wacky shapes. But if we're going to keep them together, that means that the districts that you see may look funny. So don't be concerned if the district looks funny. There may be a very good reason for that. And we have to submit a report with our maps, which will try to explain why we've made the choices that we've made. The last criterion is nesting. And again, this is after all 5 of the previous criteria have been met. The Constitution asks us to nest districts. So that would mean that every state Senate district would consist of 2 adjacent and complete assembly districts, since there are twice as many assembly districts as there are Senate districts. And since there are 10 times as many Senate districts as there are Board of Equalization districts, then every Board of Equalization district should consist of 10 complete and adjacent Senate districts. Now, again, I emphasize this is the very last one of the criteria. We have to follow these in this order. So if you see districts that don't perfectly nest, there's probably a good reason that they don't perfectly nest. Now, there are 2 other considerations stipulated in the state constitution. The place of residence of any incumbent or any political candidate may not be considered in the creation of a map. And also, we may not draw districts for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against any incumbent, any candidate, or any political party. One of the things that we want people to be aware of is that, particularly with the California Voting Rights Act, there are more and more jurisdictions in the state that are carrying out their own redistricting efforts. We are responsible, as I mentioned, for US House districts, state Senate districts, state Assembly districts, and state Board of Equalization districts. That's going to be a total of somewhere beyond 175 maps that we have to draw. 50 of the 58 counties, some will be doing their own redistricting processes. Of all the cities in California, more and more are doing their own redistricting processes. And then we have school districts, we have water districts, we have community college districts. So there are all sorts of redistricting efforts going on. We are making an effort to collaborate with those other redistricting efforts. We are talking to them and saying, if somebody contacts you, but you realize that they need to be in touch with us, please put them in touch with us. And if somebody contacts us, but really should be talking to you, we'll do our best to put them in touch with you. And we're doing things like, putting links on each other's websites and those sorts of things. But we want people to understand that there are many different redistricting efforts, and we're only responsible for the 4 offices that we are responsible for. Just a bit of history. Prior to 2010, it was the legislators who drew the lines. So the last time they drew the lines was on the basis of the 2000 census. And if they didn't do it right, or they didn't do it in time, the courts ended up drawing the lines. So Proposition 11 in 2008, the Voters First Act, also called We Draw the Lines, set up the California Citizens Redistricting Commission and gave it responsibility for drawing districts for state Senate, state Assembly, and state Board of Equalization. It passed, as I recall, pretty easily. And folks decided, well, let's go one step further. And there was Proposition 20 on the ballot in 2010, saying let's add the mandate to draw new districts for US House of Representatives seats. So that passed in 2010, and suddenly the 2010 Commission also had congressional districts to draw. So they were the first Citizens Redistricting Commission. The term of office is 10 years. There's not a whole lot to do for most of that time. although they did win an award from Harvard University that enabled them to go in small teams around the country and talk about the experience of a Citizens Redistricting Commission. They held their last meeting in June of last year. And as I mentioned, the first 8 commissioners of the 2020 commission were drawn in a public drawing last July. So as soon as the first members of the new commission take office, the old commission ceases to exist. Other states, California was actually not the first state to have a Citizens Redistricting Commission. Arizona was the first. They have a 5-member commission in Arizona. Other states have followed suit, Colorado, Idaho. The Michigan Commission is meeting. They're going to be meeting this Thursday. I sometimes tune in just to see what they're talking about, what issues they're confronting as they work to redistrict Michigan. Montana, Washington, Virginia recently put in place a mixed redistricting commission that is, I believe, 8 legislators and 8 citizens. So there are different ways of doing this, but there does seem to be something of a trend towards citizen redistricting. The selection process is managed by the California State Auditor's Office, which is a nonpartisan body. The application process opened sometime in the first half of 2019. There were over 20,000 applications. Now, sounds like a lot. Actually, in 2010, there were more than 30,000 applications. Those were all screened for basic eligibility and compatibility issues. And a number of people were invited to submit supplemental applications, which had essay questions and asked for a lot more background information. So there were over 2,000 supplemental applications in 2019. The auditor's office set up what was called the applicant review panel. 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, 1 other, who very methodically went through all 2,000 plus of those supplemental applications. They narrowed it down bit by bit until they agreed on a pool of 120 applicants. That's 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans, and 40 others to invite for interviews. So then each of us had an interview with the applicant review panel. Those were open to the public. And once COVID hit, they were all on Zoom for everybody to see. And again, the applicant review panel deliberated on those 120 applicants and narrowed it down to a pool of 60 that they sent to the state legislature. 20 Democrats, 20 Republicans, 20 others. Once those lists got to the legislature, the legislative leaders, the Democratic and Republican leaders in both the state Senate and the state Assembly, had the opportunity to strike up to a total of 24 of the 60 candidates. So then we had a lottery with, in the end, there were 35 rather than 36 because one person who had made it all the way to that point decided to drop out. But so the lottery chose 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 2 others. And then we sat down, reviewed the applications from everyone who was still in the pool, and eventually reached agreement on a slate of 6 others to complete the 14-member commission. And this is us. So 14 members. There are 8 women, 6 men, 7 from Northern California, 7 from Southern California, ranging in age from about 30 to a bit over 60. We have NGO leaders, engineers, pastors, law enforcement officers, political scientists, public servants, and one lawyer. So we're a pretty diverse group. And we invite folks to join us. All of our meetings are streamed on Zoom via our website. And I don't know how much fun it is, but certainly for folks who are interested, we welcome folks to join us, listen in on our meetings. We try to take public comments at the beginning of each day, at least once during the middle of the day, and at the end of the day as well. Commissioner duties. So obviously the biggest duty is to come up with these maps. But also we've decided that one of our priorities is community outreach, and these educational presentations are part of that. We want to engage the public. We believe that the more the public knows about the process, the better they can engage with the process, the better public input we will get when we start talking about actual lines. So this is part of our work, an important part of our work. We have the 4 different kinds of maps here at the bottom, using the area around Sacramento as an example, just to give you an idea. Because we have differing numbers of districts to draw, they end up with different numbers of people in them. So, California has roughly 40 million people, with currently 53 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. That may go down. It may go down by 1. It may go down by 2. We don't know yet. We are hoping, we understand that we can expect those reapportionment numbers in another 10 days to 2 weeks, probably. And these numbers are from the 2010 cycle. Congressional districts had roughly 700,000 people in them. The state Senate districts had roughly 931,000 people. State assembly districts would have half that because there are twice as many districts. And then Board of Equalization would be in excess of 9 million people. So, assuming 40 million people, it's going to be, something less than 800,000 for Congress, something around 1 million for state Senate, around 500,000 for state assembly, and roughly 10 million for each of the 4 Board of Equalization districts. Now, what we've done to facilitate our outreach work is we've divided the state into what we call outreach zones. So you'll see that Riverside County and San Bernardino County are Zone I. And because I live in this zone, I'm the leader of the team, the outreach team for this zone. Commissioner Lamons is from Los Angeles. He's my colleague on this outreach team. I've asked him to focus largely on LA-based groups that spill over into San Bernardino and Riverside counties. I'm trying to do my best to reach out to the 2 counties, all of the cities in the 2 counties, civic groups in the counties, school boards, community colleges, the media, Native American groups, etc. We've got the time to be able to devote to this, and we really are trying to reach every corner of the state in the course of our outreach work. Now, going back to communities of interest, I mentioned earlier, that's kind of the heart of the matter. The fact that We can get data on county boundaries and city boundaries, but we need public input on their communities of interest. So what is a community of interest? We're defining a community of interest as a concentrated population that shares common social and or economic interests that should be included within a single district for purposes of effective and fair representation. So communities of interest can be many different things. They can be cultural. They can be areas in which people share similar living standards, have similar work opportunities, use the same transportation facilities, or have access to the same media. And you can see that because there are different types of communities of interest, people can belong to multiple communities of interest. So if you're thinking about what is my community of interest, don't necessarily limit yourself to thinking you only have one. If you have multiple communities of interest, let us know about all of them. The other thing that we were reminded of recently is communities of interest are contextual. I attended the 2011 hearing in Palm Springs of the Citizens Redistricting Commission. There was a long discussion of the Salton Sea and how the area around the Salton Sea should be represented. Should it be represented by one member of Congress, or should it be represented by two? With the thought that, two members might be able to, bring more funding to resolve issues related to the Salton Sea. And in the end, that's what happened. The area around the Salton Sea is represented by two different members of Congress. It could have been, that the decision went the other way, and the area around the Salton Sea could have been represented by only one member of Congress. But the point there is that sometimes your community of interest varies depending on whether you're talking about county board of supervisor districts or congressional districts or state senate districts or state assembly districts. So when you're thinking about what your community of interest is, maybe think about what your communities of interest are and tell us about as many of them as you want to. I also want to emphasize that a community of interest is not the same as a district. Communities of interest are going to be some of the primary building blocks that we use when we put together districts. But don't say, my community of interest is all of this, and it happens to be your current district, and it's your community of interest because you all like your current member. I mean, that's not something that's going to fly with us. Because the state constitution says that we can't take current incumbents into account when we're defining the districts. When you are defining your communities, there are different ways of describing them. Personal stories are powerful. Tell us about what draws the people of your community of interest together. What things do you want to work together on? Oral testimony can be provided at the public hearings that we will be organizing in the next phase as we move towards receiving the census data and starting work on the maps. Written testimony. We can take written testimony today. You can drop it in the mail to us. You can email it to us. We have a nifty tool that I'll tell you about shortly. But there are all sorts of ways for you to provide written descriptions of your communities of interest. Communities often get involved in redistricting because they feel like their particular issues have not been adequately addressed by their elected representatives. If you're in a city, maybe it's an issue of a dog park or sanitation issues, water issues. Are there issues that your community of interest focuses on? If so, tell us. And importantly, we need to have a good understanding of where this community of interest is. If you remember, I said it's a concentrated group of people. So it's not people who are spread out all over the state. It's people who are concentrated in a particular area. You can tell us what the area is without having to draw us a map, but we're trying to make it easy for you to draw us a map of your community of interest. So participating in the process, we've been working with the statewide database at UC Berkeley, who has developed for us an online communities of interest input tool. You might hear of it referred to as our COI tool, Communities of Interest tool. So that Communities of Interest tool is available now in multiple languages at drawmycacommunity.org. So that will ask you to give your community a name, describe the community, what brings it together, what nearby communities would you like to be grouped with in a particular district, what nearby groups do you not want to be grouped with in a district that we might draw, an opportunity to draw us a map, and then basically hit the submit button and off it goes. So that's the drawmycacommunity.org COI tool. We are also developing a paper form that will gather the exact same information. We're going to make it postage paid. We will rely on community groups to help us distribute those to people who are more comfortable filling out a paper form rather than going through this online. You can also go to our website, which is wedrawthelinesca.org. Click on the Draw My CA Community icon, and that will take you to the COI tool. People can, if they have a manual typewriter, they can sit down at their manual typewriter. They can pull out a pad and a pen and write us. Our postal address is here. It's 721 Capitol Mall, Suite 260, Sacramento, California, 95814. People can send us email at votersfirstact@crc.ca.gov. And if you want to call us on the phone, call our office at 916-323-0323, and somebody will take your information down for us. As I mentioned, the COI tool is available in multiple languages. We currently have English, Spanish, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Korean, Armenian, Farsi, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, Punjabi, and Khmer. Those were based on languages that the California Complete Count Office used to promote engagement in the census process. We are also having the tool developed in Thai and Hmong, which according to the state courts are languages that are frequently used there. So we're doing our best to make this whole process as accessible as possible to everyone in the state. Language access is very important to us. I've been campaigning pretty much since the very first meeting. So we will have most of our basic materials, our fact sheet, our flyer, FAQs, and this redistricting basics presentation eventually available in not just English, but Spanish, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Korean, Armenian, Farsi, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, Punjabi, Khmer. We're in the process right now of reviewing the Spanish version. We will be giving a public presentation in Spanish next Monday. The three of us who are the speakers for that are working to review the translation and polish it up as best we can. Interpretation of public comments at our business meetings can be provided in a variety of languages as long as we have 5 days advance notice to arrange for interpreters. Written public comment can be sent to us in any format, and we will have it translated into English. We will translate non-English language inputs from the online tool into English for the commissioners. And if anyone needs an interpreter to provide input during a meeting, again, we ask for 5 business days notice, and we will seek to arrange an interpreter as needed. We're getting close to the end, but one of the things that we need everyone to understand at this point, the state constitution sets an August 15th deadline for us to submit our maps. But the US Census Bureau has told us that we're not likely to have any redistricting data from them before that August 15th deadline. Now, a lot of states are facing potential crises because of this. Fortunately, the state legislature here in California, along with a number of community groups, got together last year and filed suit in the state Supreme Court to compel the Secretary of State to accept maps from us after that August 15th deadline. So based on expectations at that point that the census results were likely to arrive by July 31st, rather than their normal March 31st, the state Supreme Court ruled in July of last year that we should have until December 15th of this year to submit our maps, assuming that the state had received the census result by the 31st of July. The Supreme Court also said that if the census results are received by the state after the 31st of July, and at this point that is the most likely scenario, then our deadline for submitting maps will be adjusted on a day-for-day basis. If the state receives the census results 30 days after July 31st, then our final maps would be due 30 days after December 15th. So there's still a lot of uncertainty about when we will receive the results. That means that there is uncertainty about when we will submit our final maps. We are aware that this runs into the timeline for the primaries in June of next year. We are in contact with the Office of the Secretary of State, as well as the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials, to minimize or at least to understand the impact of the census delays on our work and delays on our maps on the work of election officials here in California. But we don't have any certainty yet as to when we will receive the census results, and therefore we don't know exactly when we will be submitting our final maps to the Secretary of State. This is broadly what the timeline looks like right now. So these educational presentations we're planning on going through the end of next month, at least. They may trickle over into June, but at some point we expect to shift and be organizing public meetings. We don't know yet because of public health restrictions, whether those will be in-person events or Zoom events. And it may transition in the middle of the process, from Zoom events to in-person events. We are going to be organizing these around the state to give people an opportunity to come and tell us personally about their communities of interest. The state may receive census results in an old format sometime before the end of August. One way or another, the commission would receive census data somewhere between the end of September and the end of October. So let's just say sometime in October, we expect to have census data for our use. We would shift gears again and actually have public line drawing sessions where the public is welcome to come and provide input as we sit there with our technical line drawing team working on drawing districts. At a certain point, the state constitution requires us to publish a complete set of preliminary draft maps and leave those alone, not do any further mapping for at least 2 weeks to give the public a chance to review those preliminary draft maps and provide us input. After that 2-week period, we can start taking that input into account, modifying the draft maps. And, based on our receiving census data sometime in October, we would have a deadline sometime between the end of December and mid-February. Again, depending on when the state receives the data and what kind of data they receive. So that's a rough overview of the timeline. And just a final reminder, we can't take public input on actual districting today. I can answer questions about this presentation. If you'd like to provide input about your district or your community, please go to our website, wedrawthelines.ca.org, or to the Communities of Interest tool, which is drawmycacommunity.org. And that's it. So I am happy to take questions. Yolanda, are you going to moderate? You're on mute.
Okay, let's see. How can we get the rest of the screen out? I'm not very knowledgeable in this, so.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
All right. Well, I think we can just go ahead and open it up and see who has questions now in reference to your wonderful presentation. It's very, very interesting. But we have a question here already. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Francisco.
My little hand was up before Francisco.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't notice.
No.
Okay. Francisco, you go ahead and then.
Go ahead, I'll give you a break.
Mira, I don't know if you mentioned is this law permanent or it has a sunset, or because I really like this law, the Citizen Redistricting Commission, the law itself. It is
This is permanent. No, this is permanent. We will have next year, we cannot propose any changes in years starting with 9, 0, or 1. But we actually have the authority to propose changes to the legal framework for the commission starting next year. So I'm actually one of the members of the Lessons Learned subcommittee, and we will be organizing a very robust lessons learned process, which will be open to the public. And we will talk about what changes we might like to propose to the legislature. And then once we propose it, the legislature can say yes or no. They can't alter what we propose to them. That's my understanding of how the legislative process works once we make our proposal for any changes.
Enhancement. Very good.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Francisco, for the question. Gilberto, you're next.
The last redistricting 10 years ago, the commission provided a cartographer from Berkeley to help the communities write their maps and draw their lines. Is that going to be available this time?
Well, I can answer in two ways about that. We have the same or close to the same line drawing team working for us this time. They have brought in some additional help. So Q2 is the company that is working with us as our line drawing team. They have another company called Haystack that they're working with. The statewide database at UC Berkeley, which happens to be largely the same personnel as Q2, they organized redistricting resource centers or redistricting access centers last time. We do now know that they have a plan that they had shelved because of COVID to open similar centers in several locations throughout the state. They've actually begun hiring staff for those. They don't know if or when they will be able to physically open. But if you go online and are using the communities of interest input tool and you need help or have a question and you contact them at the number or email address that's there in the communities of interest input tool, you'll actually be speaking to the staff that they are hiring for those centers.
If I recall, when the commission, as the full commission came to Riverside in Riverside County and San Bernardino County, both times they showed up here, or 3 times, I don't remember exactly, but they brought in a cartographer that stayed there for a couple of days. Is that going to happen when you come around, or?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Great, thank you.
We're also going to try to work with county library networks and the community college network to see if we can get public libraries and community colleges to also be places that could, set up a computer and have a phone line, or even someone locally who is trained to help people who show up at the library or the community college to provide input into the redistricting process. So we're, these redistricting access centers, I think the current proposal is 6 locations. Well, 6 locations for 40 million people, you can only go so far with that. But we feel that if we can engage public libraries and the community college network, that we would have a bigger and better footprint throughout the state where people could go for help to provide input into the process.
That's a good idea. Good idea. Thank you, Gilberto. Dennis Lopez was next. Dennis? Dennis, you're next. You're on mute, Dennis.
I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, yes. Will the census data include all persons regardless of immigration status for the redistricting?
Yes, that there was some concern about that last year, but that has been resolved, and all persons independent of immigration status will be included in the data that we receive.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. Maribel, thank you, Dennis. Thank you. Maribel?
Oh, no, I was just applauding that, sorry.
Oh, okay, I thought you had a question. Francisco, do you have another question?
He's left.
Okay, yes, he left for a little bit, I guess. Anyone else? Any other questions?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead,
To be allowed to ask a question. Okay.
go ahead.
The census numbers that are coming in will either increase or decrease the population in a specific demographic area. Say in our congressional district, for example. Supposing it doesn't shrink that much or it doesn't grow that much, is there, does there have to be a move, or can that same map be maintained?
The rules for congressional districts are a bit tighter than they are for state senate, state assembly, state board of equalization districts. We have to be very precise in as far as dividing the population up evenly among however many congressional districts we end up with. And because there have been significant population changes in the state, I would say it's unlikely that you will see maps stay exactly the same. Just the way the math works and the way the rules are written, that's pretty unlikely.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's see, we have Dennis. You have another question, Dennis? Dennis, your hand is up, so that's why I'm calling on you. I don't. Can you hear me? You're
No, I'm
mute.
sorry. I'll take the hand down. I'll take my hand down.
Oh,
Sorry.
do you have another question? It's okay.
No, I don't. I don't. No, I don't.
Oh,
Sorry about that. I'm trying to figure out how to take my hand down.
oh, okay, Francisco has his up too. Okay, but anyone else? Anyone else have questions in reference to the presentation and all this great information that Commissioner Kennedy gave us? Any questions, concerns?
I have another one. If nobody asks, okay. In drawing the lines for the district, what does the commission think of dividing a city in half?
We haven't gotten to the point of discussing that yet.
Oh,
As I said during the presentation, under criterion 4, we are supposed to minimize the division of counties, cities, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. Now, one of the elements of that we all have to keep in mind is within those 4 counties, cities, neighborhoods, and communities of interest, the state constitution does not establish any hierarchy among those 4. So if we feel it's more important, if listening to public input, if we feel it's more important to keep a community of interest whole than it is to keep a city whole or a county whole, then maybe we go with keeping the community of interest whole, because the state constitution gives us that flexibility. There's currently no hierarchy established between counties, cities, neighborhoods, and communities of interest.
But in that case, wouldn't the decision rest? I know you would make the final decision, but it would depend on the input from the community.
Right. And that's why it's so important for us to hear from communities throughout the state. If people don't want their community divided, they need to tell us what their community of interest is and why it should stay together. And that's what we're trying to encourage. That's what we're trying to facilitate with all of these different ways that we have of people providing input to the process.
I just want to say that I'm so glad that you're going to have more access centers for the drawing of the assistance to draw the maps, because definitely that is needed. I know that last time we went over to San Bernardino, the access center was in San Bernardino. So from Riverside, we went over there. It wasn't far, but if we have more, that'll be better to have those access centers. Yes. I also just wanted to ask you, you were talking about the progress that we're going to be making on the redistricting. For example, the next step from the basic presentation is going to come. It's on, is it on the next step after the basic presentation that you're going to be educating the public on? What is that going to be?
So the next step would be these public forums. And again, as I said, I'm not sure we will have to follow both state and local health regulations in determining whether we can do these face-to-face or whether they would be virtual. But we would organize community forums around the state to enable us to get live personal input. Some people call it testimony, as to, what people's communities of interest are and why we should group them in a certain way and keep them whole and so forth. So that's the next step.
That's the next.
Even before we get the actual redistricting data. Once we get the redistricting data, then we will shift and actually start drawing actual districts. And as I said, the communities of interest are building blocks that we will put together to build districts. So the more input that we have, the better we understand all of the communities of interest in the state, the better job we can do in building districts that people are happy with.
Mm-hmm.
And in this communities of interest input tool, we were very deliberate in saying, what nearby communities of interest do you want to be grouped with in a district? And what nearby groups do you not want to be grouped with in a district? Maybe that the people on the other side of the highway, you just think they're completely different, that they need to be in their own district. Tell us that.
Yes. And that is already available, that we can
Yes.
start working on that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's going to be a big help.
Yeah.
Yeah, to do that. And the data from the census, we had heard that probably it would be out by the end of this month, April, but no way. Huh?
Well, what we are expecting at the end of this month is called the apportionment data. So the apportionment data is basically the total population for each of the 50 states. And the total population for each of the 50 states will then enable, Congress, I think, actually does this. It will enable them to reapportion the 435 seats in the House of Representatives among the states.
Okay.
So speculation, out there in the media is that Texas may gain as many as 3 seats. Florida may gain as many as 2 seats. There's another handful of states that are likely to gain 1 seat each. Those seats have to come from somewhere. So there are a handful of seats of states that are likely to lose 1 seat. And speculation is that California might lose a seat. It might lose 2 seats. It depends on how successful the census was here in California in comparison to how successful the census was in other states. If California achieved a higher count of its actual population, it could be that, the state avoids losing any seats, or certainly limits its loss to 1 seat rather than losing 2 seats. But if we didn't do as well as other states did, then we could lose more seats rather than less seats.
I hope not. I hope not. Any other questions from anyone? Feel free.
Somebody had a question in the chat box.
Oh, okay.
Where will the Maribel, where will the access centers be? So we circulated a memo at our last meeting, so it is a public document on our website. And I just had it up. The currently planned locations are Sacramento, somewhere in the Bay Area, Fresno, Long Beach, San Bernardino, and San Diego. Those are planned. They're not up and running yet. We don't know if or when they would be up and running, but those are the locations that they are looking at establishing these access centers in.
And
At Riverside County?
There is currently not an access center planned for Riverside County. As I mentioned, we are going to be trying to convince county library networks, county library systems, and the community college system to help us out. They might be, kind of satellite redistricting access centers, but those are discussions that are just really beginning at this point. So we don't know. We know that, there have been some expressions of interest from some libraries, from some community colleges, but we don't know how successful those discussions will eventually be.
well, I think that's going to really matter this time around, because we have so many more people participating in the process that the demand is going to be higher than it was last time. And I'm just wondering, why San Bernardino again? Why not Riverside County?
That I don't know. But this was something that was developed before the current commission even existed. These plans were being put together before we were seated.
Okay, well, that's interesting, huh? I don't know, I guess it's because I would expect it to also to at least take turns. But anyway, any other questions? None?
I guess a follow-up to that question is that who ultimately decides where the access centers will be?
That is, it's a project of the statewide database, which is an office up at UC Berkeley. They have funding from the state legislature for these access centers.
Well, those are very good questions. And Commissioner Kennedy, thank you so much for a great presentation. We sincerely appreciate it. And we've learned quite a bit.
Good.
It's also very good for us to refresh, what we went through last time. But this is so much better, I have to say. The presentation you made today is just so much better than in the past.
Well, in fairness, the 2010 Commission held its first meeting in January of 2011. So we held our first meeting in late August of 2020. September, October, November, December, we're like at least 5 months ahead of the game compared to the 2010 Commission. They received their census data on time.
Yeah.
So late March, early April, they had all of their census data and didn't have, and were just putting, as they say, building the airplane as it was rolling down the runway. So they didn't have the time to develop a redistricting basics presentation. So, we're trying to take good advantage of the additional time that we have. We appreciate having the time, and we're trying to put it to best use to engage with people and groups throughout the state.
Well, we appreciate it. We sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much. And do I send you a copy of
You-
the recording?
You can speak with Patricia in our office in Sacramento,
Okay,
Patricia Vasquez Topete.
all right. Okay, and send it to her probably.
Yes, yes. And if you could, we would very much appreciate it if you'd get the word out about the Spanish language redistricting basics presentation, which will be at 5 p.m. on Monday, the 26th.
The 26th, okay. At 6 p.m.?
5 p.m.
5 p.m. Okay. All right, you know, and I was also going, I had that question before and I have forgotten it about translation. If we take community people or if we have them in Zoom, you said that speak Spanish only or another language, as long as we notify you 5 days in advance, then you would be able to provide a translator.
Right,
Okay.
right. And, you know, in the case of Spanish, you know, there's at least a handful of us on the commission who speak Spanish. So we're going to do what we can. We're always going to do what we can to ensure that we're able to engage with the people of California.
Mhm. Well,
But this event coming up on Monday, particularly for those who have limited English proficiency, the event coming up on Monday is a real opportunity for them to learn about the process and get their questions answered.
that sounds great. That's wonderful that is available also. That is absolutely wonderful. Will you be making the presentation?
With two of my colleagues. So the English language public presentation was today. So there were 3 commissioners doing that. We decided to do these with 3 commissioners, 1 Democrat, 1 Republican, and 1 no party preference. So I'll be the Democrat on the panel for Monday's presentation.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much again. I can't thank you enough, and it's been enjoyable and very informative, that's for sure. So we'll continue
Excellent.
to work on this very important project.
Very good. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening, everyone.
You too, and I hope we get to see you again.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Okay, good, good. Thank you so much. Good night.
Sure. Good night.
Night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We really sincerely appreciate all your support and you being here, because I know that you're interested in this project. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Good night.
Yolanda, can you stop the recording?
Can I stop it?
Yeah, can you go to this record and stop?
Okay, but you said for me not to stop it until it downloaded?
Oh, I'm the host. Why am I the host?
Oh, it was Mr. Kennedy that was the host.
I'm gonna make you host because I don't want to mess this up.
Okay. How do you make me host? How do I know? I'm host?
You already host.
Okay, so what do I do now?
Go to the recording.
It's recording. It says stop recording, but because it is recording right now.
Yeah, you need to stop it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Stop recording. I hit that. Do I hit it again?
It hasn't stopped.
Okay. Do you want to stop recording? Put yes.
Mhm.